My name is Sophia Lopez, and at 32, I thought I understood the rhythm of Azurite Valley Medical Center. As a clinical nurse manager on the 4th floor of our Bluestone, Colorado facility, I'd spent 7 years learning every creak of the old building, every quirk of our electronic health record system, and every personality that walked these sterile halls. The mountains outside our windows promised stability, their snow-capped peaks unchanged through seasons of chaos. Inside, however, something had shifted in recent weeks, like a frequency only I could hear. It started with small things. Medication reconciliation reports that didn't quite add up. Pharmacy orders processed faster than usual, sometimes bypassing the standard verification protocols that had been drilled into us during every safety meeting. Our clinical pharmacist, Catherine Ingram, had always been efficient, but lately her speed seemed almost supernatural. Catherine had been my closest professional ally for 3 years. She managed our medication safety protocols and error reporting with meticulous care, or so I believed. We'd collaborated on countless patient cases, shared coffee during night shifts, and built what I thought was unshakable trust. She was the person I called when complex drug interactions needed immediate attention, the colleague who stayed late to ensure every prescription was perfect. But trust, I was learning, could be as fragile as the patients we served. The first real warning came during a routine audit. I was reviewing medication administration records when I noticed several entries that seemed rushed, lacking the detailed documentation Catherine usually provided. When I mentioned it casually, she laughed it off, claiming the new Epic system update was causing display issues. Then came the incident with Mrs. Patterson's insulin protocol. The order had been processed and approved in record time, but when I cross-referenced it with her allergy profile, something fell wrong. The timing didn't match our standard verification procedures. Catherine assured me everything was properly checked, but her explanation felt rehearsed. That grew stronger each day. Conversations stopped when I entered the pharmacy. Catherine's usual warmth became professional distance. Other staff members seemed nervous around medication discussions, their eyes darting away when I asked routine questions about protocol compliance. Last Tuesday, I found myself standing outside the pharmacy after midnight, watching through the small window as Catherine worked alone. Her movements were quick, almost frantic, as she processed orders with barely a glance at the verification screens. She was cutting corners, but why? The mountains outside remained constant, but inside Azurite Valley Medical Center, something was terribly wrong. And I was beginning to suspect that the person I trusted most with our patients' safety was the very person putting them at risk. The betrayal began 3 months earlier, though I didn't recognize it then. Catherine Ingram had been my closest professional ally for 3 years, and our partnership felt unbreakable. She'd joined Azurite Valley Medical Center, fresh from her PharmD program, eager and meticulous. I watched her grow from a nervous new graduate into someone I considered the gold standard for clinical pharmacy practice. Our relationship started during her orientation week. I was covering the evening shift when a complex case came through, a patient with multiple drug allergies requiring careful medication reconciliation. Catherine stayed 2 hours past her shift, double-checking every interaction, every contraindication. That dedication impressed me immediately. Over the years, we developed an efficient rhythm. She managed our medication safety protocols with extraordinary attention to detail, maintaining error reporting systems that became a model for other departments. During night shifts, we'd share coffee in the break room, discussing challenging cases and new pharmaceutical research. She had this way of explaining complex drug mechanisms that made even the most intricate protocols seem manageable. Catherine became my go-to person for urgent consultations. When emergency situations arose requiring immediate medication decisions, I knew I could trust her judgment completely. She'd arrive within minutes, armed with comprehensive drug interaction analyses and alternative treatment options. Her thoroughness saved us from potential complications countless times. But looking back now, I realize the warning signs were there much earlier than I'd admitted to myself. It started with small inconsistencies in her documentation. Catherine had always been obsessive about detailed notes, but suddenly her entries became brief, almost perfunctory. When I mentioned it during one of our coffee breaks, she explained that the new Epic system update was streamlining her workflow, making lengthy documentation unnecessary. The explanation seemed reasonable. Hospital technology updates often changed established procedures, and Catherine had always adapted quickly to new systems. I trusted her expertise and didn't question it further. Then came the medication turnaround times. Catherine began processing orders with unprecedented speed. What used to take 20 minutes for complex prescriptions now took 5. Other nurses started commenting on how efficiently the pharmacy was running, praising Catherine's improved productivity. Initially, I felt proud of her professional growth. Efficiency improvements benefited everyone. Faster medication delivery meant better patient care. But something nagged at me about the dramatic change in her working style. The first concrete incident happened on a Thursday evening. Mrs. Patterson, a diabetic patient with multiple allergies, needed an adjusted insulin protocol. I submitted the order through Epic, expecting Catherine's usual thorough review process. Within 3 minutes, the approval notification appeared on my screen. 3 minutes seemed impossibly fast for Catherine's typically meticulous approach. Mrs. Patterson's case required cross-referencing her extensive allergy profile, checking for potential interactions with her other medications, and verifying dosage calculations. Catherine usually spent at least 15 minutes on similar cases. I walked to the pharmacy to discuss the order. Catherine was busy with another prescription, barely looking up when I approached. "Everything's properly verified," she said before I could speak. "The new protocols are much more efficient." Her response felt rehearsed, lacking the detailed explanation she typically provided. Catherine loved discussing complex cases, walking through her decision-making process step by step. This dismissive response was completely out of character. Over the following weeks, I noticed other changes. Catherine's usual warmth became professional distance. She stopped initiating conversations about interesting cases or new research findings. Our coffee breaks became brief, functional exchanges about immediate work needs. Other staff members seemed to sense the shift too. Conversations in the pharmacy would stop abruptly when I entered. Nurses who used to freely discuss medication concerns with Catherine now seemed hesitant, their questions becoming more formal and guarded. The atmosphere in our department grew tense. Alexander Morrison, one of our senior nurses, mentioned feeling uncomfortable about recent medication protocols. "Something feels different," he said during a shift change. "I can't put my finger on it, but the pharmacy interactions don't feel the same." I tried to dismiss these concerns as adjustment difficulties with new procedures, but my own continued growing. Catherine's behavior became increasingly erratic. She'd arrive early and stay late, working alone in the pharmacy with unusual intensity. One evening, I decided to observe more carefully. From the nurse's station, I could see into the pharmacy through the service window. Catherine was processing orders rapidly, her fingers flying across the keyboard. But she wasn't looking at the verification screens with her usual careful attention. Instead, she seemed to be rushing through each step, barely pausing to review critical information. The realization hit me gradually, then all at once. Catherine wasn't being more efficient. She was cutting corners. The detailed verification processes that ensured patient safety were being bypassed in favor of speed. My hands trembled as I accessed the medication administration records on my computer. Scrolling through recent entries, I found pattern after pattern of abbreviated documentation, rushed approvals, and missing verification steps. The slow-mo was overwhelming once I knew what to look for. Catherine Ingram, the colleague I trusted most with our patients' medication safety, was systematically bypassing proper patient identification protocols to save time. The person responsible for preventing medication errors was creating the very conditions that could cause them. The betrayal cut deeper than any professional misconduct I'd ever encountered. This wasn't just about broken protocols or administrative failures. This was about trust, friendship, and the fundamental responsibility we shared to protect vulnerable patients. Standing in that hallway, staring at the on my screen, I realized that everything I thought I knew about Catherine and about my own judgment had been wrong. The next morning arrived with the weight of impossible decisions. I'd spent the entire night reviewing medication records, documenting every bypassed protocol, every rushed verification. They painted a clear picture of systematic safety violations that could have endangered dozens of patients. But confronting Catherine meant destroying a friendship and potentially ending her career. The woman who'd mentored me, who'd shared countless coffee breaks discussing patient care improvements, who'd celebrated my promotion to charge nurse. That same person was now the subject of a damning investigation I was about to initiate. I found Catherine in the pharmacy at 7 a.m., already deep into her morning medication preparations. She looked up with her familiar warm smile when I approached the service window. Morning, Sophia. You're here early today. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Privately. Something in my tone made her pause. The smile faded as she studied my expression. Of course. Let me finish this order and we can use the consultation room. 5 minutes later, we sat across from each other in the small, windowless room where pharmacists typically counseled patients about complex medications. The irony wasn't lost on me. I've been reviewing medication administration records, I began, placing a folder of printed documentation between us. There are some concerning patterns I need to discuss with you. Catherine's face went pale as she opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the highlighted sections, missing patient verification steps, abbreviated safety checks, rushed approval timestamps. The PRU was undeniable. Sophia, I can explain. Can you? Because what I'm seeing here suggests you've been systematically bypassing patient identification protocols for weeks, maybe months. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. For a moment, the confident, competent pharmacist I'd known disappeared, replaced by someone who looked exhausted and defeated. The workload has been impossible, she said quietly. Ever since the budget cuts, we're expected to process twice as many orders with the same staffing. The administration keeps pushing for faster turnaround times, better efficiency metrics. I was trying to keep up. By cutting corners on patient safety? By streamlining redundant processes, she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. Look, I know every patient on these floors. I've been here for 8 years. I don't need to verify Mrs. Johnson's identity for the 3rd time, when I just saw her 20 minutes ago. That's not how protocols work, Catherine. You know that better than anyone. She stood and began pacing the small room. Do you have any idea what it's like to have administrators breathing down your neck about productivity while simultaneously demanding 0 errors? It's impossible. Something had to give. So you chose to compromise patient safety. I chose to use my professional judgment to maintain efficiency without compromising care. Not a single patient was harmed by my decisions. That you know of. But that's not the point, and you know it. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, growing more heated as Catherine alternated between justification and defensiveness. She accused me of being naive about hospital politics, of not understanding the pressures she faced. I countered that no external pressure justified abandoning fundamental safety protocols. Finally, she sat back down and looked directly at me. What are you going to do? I have to report this to the pharmacy director and risk management. Sophia, please. Think about what you're doing. This will my career. I have a family, a mortgage. One mistake. This isn't one mistake. This is a pattern of deliberate protocol violations. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Colder, more calculating. You realize this. Reflects poorly on you too, right? As charge nurse, you're supposed to monitor medication administration. If there were really safety issues, why didn't you catch them sooner? What does it say about your oversight? The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Catherine was suggesting that my delayed discovery of her violations could be framed as negligent supervision. It was a desperate move, but one that could potentially damage my own career. Are you threatening me? I'm pointing out reality. We're colleagues. We should be protecting each other, not throwing each other under the bus. I gathered the documentation and stood. I'm sorry, Catherine. I really am. But I can't protect you from the consequences of your own choices. Her expression hardened. Then I guess we'll see how this plays out. The next few hours were a blur of difficult conversations. I met with Diana Blackwood, the pharmacy director, who listened with growing concern as I presented the sod. Her professional composure cracked slightly when she realized the scope of the violations. How long has this been going on? She asked. Based on what I can document, at least 6 weeks, possibly longer. Diana immediately initiated an emergency review, pulling Catherine from active duty pending investigation. The decision sent ripples through the pharmacy staff, who knew something serious was happening but weren't given details. By afternoon, word had spread through the hospital's informal communication network. Colleagues approached me with questions I couldn't answer, speculation I couldn't confirm or deny. The atmosphere on our floor became tense and uncomfortable. The one person who provided unwavering support was Alexander Morrison, a senior nurse who'd worked at Azurite Valley for over 15 years. He found me during my break sitting alone in the staff lounge. "Rough day?" he asked, settling into the chair across from me. "That's an understatement. For what it's worth, you did the right thing." I'd been watching the pharmacy operations too, and something felt off. I just couldn't put my finger on what. His validation meant more than I could express. "Catherine thinks I'm destroying her career over minor efficiency improvements. Catherine's been cutting corners for months. I've seen her rush through verifications, skip double checks. I should have said something sooner." Alexander shook his head. "The truth is, we all noticed, but nobody wanted to believe it." "Why didn't anyone speak up?" "Same reason you hesitated. She's well-liked, competent in most areas, and, frankly, the pharmacy has been under tremendous pressure. It was easier to assume she knew what she was doing." The investigation moved quickly. Risk management brought in external auditors who reviewed months of medication records. They found additional violations I'd missed, including instances where Catherine had overridden safety alerts without proper documentation. 3 days later, I was called to a meeting with hospital administration. Catherine was there too, along with her union representative, the pharmacy director, and the chief medical officer. The PANAC was presented methodically. Catherine's representative argued that the violations were minor, that no patients had been harmed, and that the hospital's unrealistic productivity expectations had created an impossible working environment. But the auditors had found something more damaging. Catherine had falsified timestamps on several medication verifications, making it appear that proper protocols had been followed when they hadn't. This wasn't just corner cutting. It was deliberate documentation fraud. Catherine's employment was terminated immediately. Her pharmacy license would be reviewed by the state board. The union representative's arguments about productivity pressure fell flat in the face of falsified records. As we left the meeting, Catherine approached me in the hallway. Her earlier anger had been replaced by something that looked like resignation. "I hope you're satisfied," she said quietly. "I'm not satisfied about any of this. I'm sorry it came to this." "Are you? Because it seems like you got exactly what you wanted. What I wanted was for you to follow the protocols that keep our patients safe. That's all I ever wanted." She studied my face for a moment, then shook her head. "You have no idea what you've done. But you'll learn. This place will chew you up and spit you out, just like it did to me." With that, she walked away, leaving me standing alone in the corridor where we'd shared so many conversations about patient care and professional growth. The aftermath was swift but thorough. New oversight procedures were implemented in the pharmacy. Additional staff was hired to address the workload issues that had contributed to the pressure Catherine felt. Most importantly, a comprehensive review of all recent medication administrations confirmed that while protocols had been violated, no patients had suffered adverse effects. But the personal cost was significant. I'd lost a friend and mentor, gained a reputation as someone willing to report colleagues, and learned that the people I trusted most were capable of betraying the fundamental principles of our profession. The silence in the pharmacy felt different now. Not efficient, but empty. 8 months later, I stood in the conference room at Mountain View Regional Hospital, 30 miles north of Bluestone, watching as the last member of our newly formed Patient Safety Committee took their seat. The morning sun streamed through windows that actually opened, a small luxury I'd grown to appreciate in my new role as Clinical Safety Coordinator. "Thank you all for being here," I began, looking around the table at faces that had become familiar over the past few months. "Today we're implementing our proactive monitoring system for medication safety protocols." The transition hadn't been immediate. After Catherine's termination, I'd stayed at Azurite Valley for another 4 months, working to rebuild trust and establish new safety procedures. But the weight of those hallways, the memories embedded in every corner of the pharmacy, had made it impossible to find peace there. When the position at Mountain View opened, Diana Ingram from Human Resources had encouraged me to apply. "Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need," she'd said. And she'd been right. Here, I help establish patient safety rounds and proactive monitoring systems that catch potential issues before they become problems. The work feels purposeful in a way that goes beyond individual patient interactions. We're building systems that protect everyone who walks through these doors. The committee members, nurses, pharmacists, physicians, and administrators listened intently as I outlined our new double verification protocols. Unlike the rushed environment at Azurite Valley, Mountain View had committed to adequate staffing levels and realistic productivity expectations. Questions? I asked after presenting the framework. Dr. Alexander Morrison, the chief medical officer, raised his hand. How do we ensure compliance without creating a punitive environment? Education and support, I replied. When people understand why protocols exist and feel supported in following them, compliance becomes natural rather than forced. It was a lesson learned through painful experience. After the meeting, I walked through the hospital corridors, noting the calm efficiency that permeated the atmosphere. Staff moved with purpose, but not panic. Conversations happened at normal volumes. The electronic medication dispensing systems hummed quietly, processing orders through proper channels with adequate time for verification. My phone buzzed with a text from Teresa Ingram, my former colleague at Azurite Valley, who'd supported me through the investigation. Saw the article about your new safety program in Healthcare Weekly. Proud of you. The recognition felt good, but more important was knowing that the systems we'd implemented were working. 0 medication errors in the past 3 months. Staff satisfaction scores consistently high. Patient safety indicators all trending positive. Sometimes I wondered about Catherine. The state board had suspended her license for 6 months and required additional training before reinstatement. I'd heard she'd moved to Denver, possibly working in a non-clinical role while completing her requirements. I didn't feel satisfaction about her downfall, only sadness that someone so capable had chosen shortcuts over safety. But I'd learned that protecting patients sometimes meant making difficult decisions about colleagues, even friends. The afternoon brought our weekly safety rounds, where I joined teams on each unit to observe workflows and identify potential improvements. It was proactive rather than reactive, catching problems before they reached patients rather than investigating after incidents occurred. As evening approached, I completed my documentation and prepared to leave. The parking lot was quiet, the mountain peaks visible in the distance under a clear Colorado sky. My phone rang as I reached my car. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Sophia? This is Dr. Patricia Ingram from the State Hospital Association. We've been following your work at Mountain View, and we'd like to discuss expanding your safety protocols statewide. The conversation lasted 20 minutes, outlining opportunities to influence patient safety across Colorado's hospital system. It was exactly the kind of systemic change I'd hoped to achieve when I first entered healthcare. Driving home through the mountain roads, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal at Azurite Valley had shattered my trust in colleagues and systems I'd believed were unshakable. But from that destruction had come something stronger, a commitment to building better systems and a clearer understanding of what true patient advocacy required. The house I'd rented in the foothills was small but peaceful, with a view of the valley below. I'd started a garden in the backyard, something I'd never had time for during the chaos of my previous position. As I prepared dinner, my mind wandered to the patients whose safety depended on the systems we'd built. They would never know how close some of them had come to receiving incorrect medications, or how many potential errors our new protocols prevented each day. That anonymity felt appropriate. The best safety measures were invisible to those they protected. Later, sitting on my back porch with a cup of tea, I watched the lights come on in the valley below. Each one represented families, lives, stories I would never know but had somehow touched through my work. The silence here was different from the oppressive quiet that had settled over Azurite Valley after Catherine's departure. This was peaceful, earned through months of rebuilding trust and creating something better from the wreckage of betrayal. My phone remained silent. No emergency calls, no crisis meetings, no urgent problems requiring immediate attention. Just the gentle sounds of evening settling over the mountains. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.